This is part 2, episode 92. Hui Yuhao nodded gently and didn't say anything. However, there was a resolute look in his eyes. It was just that Nangong Wan didn't know that he wasn't determined just to win the tournament. The 7 judges were the next to be introduced. They were all advanced level soul engineers. There were 3 class 9 soul engineers among them, and the remaining 4 were class 8. As the 7 of them appeared together, they seemed very imposing. Their speeches weren't as intense, they were more focused on the fairness of the tournament. They didn't provoke the 9 competitors with their words. The 7 judges were soon seated on the stage in 7 comfortable seats that had been prepared for them beforehand. There were now 9 carving tables on this wide stage. These carving tables were each twice as big as the carving tables used in the previous rounds. At this point, the members from the 3 organizations were setting up the equipment and rare metals that they had brought along. Before the tournament even started, the 3 parties were already pitted against one another. Through his spiritual detection, Hui Yuhao observed the 9 carving tables. Even though he was a composed person, he couldn't help but be moved. He'd never seen such a level of equipment, even at the illustrious Virtue Hall. Every instrument and tool was exquisite. With all this, his speed and precision would be greatly increased. Furthermore, it might even be possible for him to create a soul tool beyond his class. As for rare metals, he had as much as he wanted. There were even some rare metals that Hui Yuhao had never seen before. The Duskwater Alliance had the greatest variety of rare metals. There were 64 different types. The glow from all these rare metals even tempted the judges on the stage. They've really spent a lot. Hui Yuhao was in awe. He looked around to meet Hikaitu's eyes. They had already made plans before they came. In the grand final, they weren't going to hold back anymore. On the one hand, they could test their abilities. On the other, they wanted the lucrative rewards. If they won, they could obtain a Class 9 soul tool, along with the Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell. Such things couldn't be bought with money. Moreover, they would also win a ton of rare metals. Hui Yuhao was more attracted to things he didn't know about. If Hikaitu was given the opportunity to do some research with all these things, he might be able to invent new soul tools. Alright, the exciting moment is here. As the 3 parties prepare their equipment for the tournament later, we'll let our 7 judges safeguard our grand final prize. This prize has been prepared for our winner tonight. Let's invite our chief judge for tonight, Class 9 Soul Engineer, and the Starsky Doluo Yi Yulin, to present our grand final prize. An elder seated in the center of the 7 judges stood up. He lifted his right hand, and a spot of silver light shot into the sky. It was like a silver spark. However, it grew in size as it ascended. When it was 100 meters in the air, it actually turned into a bright ball of silver light. Starsky Doluo Yi Yulin. Hui Yuhao was stunned. When he was in Shrek Academy, he had heard teacher Fan Yu mention a few notable Class 9 soul engineers in the Sun Moon Empire. The Starsky Doluo was a Class 9 soul engineer, around rank 92 or 93. In terms of soul tool creation, he was a genius. He was comparable to Jing Hongchen, and specialized in creating all types of high-altitude soul tools, which was how he had gotten his title. Hikaitu's Eye of Fear was invented by this man. It was rumored that his soul tools could turn into stars during a war, unleashing great offensive strength. He could even tap into celestial phenomena to attack. His namesake soul tool was called the Sun Moon Divine Needle. It was ranked as having among the highest levels of offensive power of all Class 9 soul tools. The ball of silver light in the sky finally stabilized. Following this, a silver ray descended from the sky and landed on Yi Yulin. He didn't make a sound, but mimicked a lifting action. Suddenly, a dim golden ball of light appeared within the silver ray of light. This ball had a diameter of 1 meter. As it slowly rose, it resembled a sun, shining along with the ball of silver light, until it arrived next to it. These 2 balls of light coordinated with each other in the sky, revolving around an invisible center. They wove into a larger golden-silver ball up in the air. There was no strong aura from these 2 balls of light. However, all the Class 8 and above Soul engineers that were familiar with the Starsky Doluor were shocked when they saw them. Our revered Master Yi, can you introduce this prize to all of us? In the face of Yi Yulin, Lu Qi appeared very respectful. Yi Yulin was an elder with a bald head. His cheeks were rosy, and his gaze was electrifying. He lifted his head, and was a little reluctant as he looked at the gold and silver ball of light. He said, "Tonight's grand final prize is a soul tool that I created. I call it the Sun Moon Divine Needle. The reason behind this name is because it is an anchor for the Sun Moon Empire. It's able to make up for the flaw of my Sun Divine Needle, which only works in the day. It is an offensive type soul tool. It can rise 1,600 meters into the air, and has an effective range of 30 kilometers. With sufficient spiritual power, it can detect a target up to 30 kilometers away, and produce an accurate attack. However, I'd like to caution all our young competitors, this soul tool is my proudest work. I hope you don't tarnish it. At the same time, please do not dismantle it in an attempt to study it. Otherwise, you'll only suffer from its backlash." Sun Moon Divine Needle. Hui Yuhao and He Kai-tu were both shocked. A Class 9 soul tool with an effective range of 30 kilometers. It could also unleash immense spiritual power for detection and accuracy. It was too powerful. This was their first time encountering a Class 9 soul tool. They only now realized why a Class 9 soul engineer could challenge a title Doluor, even though his martial soul wasn't very strong. In addition, they also discovered how a Class 9 soul engineer possessed an obvious advantage in a war. In a duel, a Class 9 soul engineer was definitely inferior to a 9-ringed title Doluor. However, the Class 9 soul tools that they created were lethal. Hui Yuhao had seen a Class 8 soul tool before. However, it was far different from this Class 9 soul tool. Of course, the Sun Moon Divine Needle was one of the top-ranked Class 9 soul tools too. He Kai-tu was a little excited as he whispered, "Little Junior, this thing was custom-made for you." Hui Yuhao focused his gaze and glared at him. He Kai-tu only then realized that he had said the wrong words, and quickly shut his mouth. However, Nangong Wan and the third elder both heard him mention the words, "Little Junior." Although they were a little doubtful, they weren't suspicious, as He Kai-tu didn't expose anything further, so they didn't say anything. After all, Hui Yuhao seemed like an evil soul master who specialized in spiritual calling. With his great spiritual power, he was very suited to use the Sun Moon Divine Needle. The third elder snorted and said, "Don't be fooled by Yi Yulin. His Sun Moon Divine Noodle is good, but it takes 3 days to charge. In addition, it can only be charged using Sun Moon Essence. Its offensive strength is great, but it can only be used 3 times after being charged. Furthermore, a lot of soul power is depleted every time it's used. It's very taxing. The 30-kilometer effective range is theoretical, too. However, it's true that it can reach 1,600 meters into the air." Nan Gongwan chortled and said, "Third elder, admit it. You are indeed inferior to Yi Yulin in terms of high-altitude soul tools. He's also representing the imperial family. Why do you have to pit yourself against him? Although the Sun Moon Divine Needle is difficult to use, it's still one of the best Class 9 soul tools. There are only benefits to be reaped by getting it. However, it's best not to use it before you have 9 rings, or you might suffer from a backlash. From what Yi Yulin said, I think he has some kind of self-detonation setting installed into it, too. Don't try to dismantle it." While he was talking to all of them, he was actually looking at Hui Yuhao as he was speaking. It really felt as if he were a teacher guiding his student. Hui Yuhao didn't make a sound, and only nodded gently. He Kai-tu laughed to himself. Those who are good are always meant to shine. No matter where little Junior goes, he always captures attention. Even evil soul masters want to accept him as a disciple. The introduction of this prize caused a huge uproar. The tournament was about to start. Tonight's final in the western suburb was bound to cause a huge wave in the empire. Let us now invite the 9 competitors of the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament to come up to the stage now. Our accurate timer type soul tool has already been prepared. In our first segment for tonight, the competitors will be given 6 hours to create a soul tool. Our 7 judges will be monitoring them throughout the entire 6 hours. Those who try to flout the rules and attempt unfair means will be disqualified. Please treat this tournament seriously, Lu Qi said with a stern look on his face. He shifted his body to one side and gestured. The competitors from the 3 organizations exited their resting areas. They followed their respective leaders up onto the stage. He Kaitu was still pushing Hu Yuhao's wheelchair. Besides him, the rest of the competitors were fit and healthy. Nangong Wan was the frontmost person. He was the first to ascend the stage. His gaze was very sharp, and he glanced coldly at Lu Qi. Lu Qi was petrified, and felt as if his head had been hammered. His expression changed in horror, and he subconsciously took a step back. And Litong was still wearing the pretentious smile on his face. He glanced at the 3 behind Nangong Wan, and his smile became a little forced. He said, "Master Nangong, I'd heard there was a disabled person among your 3 representatives and thought it was a joke, but it's really true that you've picked a cripple. You are really creative." Nan Gongwan smiled and said, "Physical disabilities are nothing. The worst disability is up here. It's fatal." As he spoke, he pointed to his own head. And Litong's expression changed slightly. He was a bit terrified of Nangong Wan. After years of interaction, he naturally knew that Nangong Wan was an evil soul master. It was just that the Alto Chamber of Commerce was backed by the military, and thus he wasn't afraid of dealing with Nangong Wan on a large scale. "Oh. Brother Nangong, you are still as trenchant as ever. I'm so terrified." Shangguan Weia walked up to the stage in her usual manner, and arrived beside Nangong Wan. Nangong Wan's smile became wider. "Long time no see, elder sister Shangguan. You still look as young as ever. I admire you so much for that." Nangong Wan looked like an elder, but he called Shangguan Weia his elder sister. Everyone felt very irked by that. The enchantment they were under after seeing Shangguan Wei's stunning looks also disappeared. Her expression changed, and she immediately seemed very cold. "Nangong Wan, you are courting death." Nangong Wan was still smiling widely as before. 2 silver-gray sparks appeared in his eyes. "Elder sister Shangguan, calm down. The tournament is about to start." Shangguan Weia was also slightly petrified when she saw the sparks in his eyes. She snorted and regained her original expression. "Then let's start. I'll make you pay for what's happened today another time." After the 3 leaders completed their brief exchange of words, they all retreated to their own sides. Apart from observing the competitors, they didn't do anything else. Under so many watchful eyes, even they didn't dare to pull any tricks. Hu Yuhao was also observing his opponents. The 3 representatives from the Alto Chamber of Commerce were all men. They seemed to be around 30 years old, and didn't look very special. The only notable thing about the 3 of them was their composure. Evidently, they were experienced and talented soul engineers. The Common Alliance was bound to draw attention. All 3 of their representatives were ladies. There were women soul engineers, but they were much rarer than male soul engineers. The Common Alliance sent out 3 women soul engineers, and they were all extremely pretty. It was shocking. Evidently, they were all nurtured by the Common Alliance. The 3 of them were clad in 3 different colors: red, yellow, and blue. These 3 primary colors were indeed very recognizable. The lady in red was extremely stunning. She was like a blooming rose, whereas the lady in blue seemed very cold and arrogant. As for the lady in yellow, she was wearing a long palace dress. She was extremely elegant, just like a princess. The 3 ladies were all special in their own ways. All of them were extremely outstanding. However, Hu Yuhao only thought of them as ordinary people, because they couldn't control their own souls. Everything they displayed on the surface was actually trained, they weren't natural. Such ladies couldn't compare to Wang Donga. They weren't even fit to compare with Wang Donga. Don't be fooled by their looks. The soul engineers nurtured by the Common Alliance are very cunning. If there's an opportunity, go hard on them. Don't give them a chance. Nan Gongwan's voice sounded in Hikaitu, Hui Yuhao and Huang Jing's ears. Hui Yuhao thought of something. Indeed, these ladies would gain an advantage to a certain extent. Against ravishing beauties, any normal man would be more merciful. Yi Yulin gestured and said, all three leaders, please step down from the stage. Competitors, get into position and get ready to compete. Nan Gongwan, Shangguan Weiya, and An Litong looked at one another. There was a cold look in their eyes as they turned around. Hikaitu pushed Hui Yuhao behind a carving table before he proceeded to his own carving table behind him. Yi Yulin placed his hands behind his back. He seemed very stern. Even in the face of the leaders from the three organizations, he continued to be very blunt. If not for the fact that Xu Tianran had personally invited him, he wouldn't have appeared today. He was only willing to part with his Sun Moon Divine Needle after Xu Tianran promised him compensation. In his opinion, soul engineers should be more invested in soul tool research. Competing in tournaments was a waste of time. Moreover, this tournament was organized by underground organizations. That was why he didn't like any of the competitors that were going to compete. They were both Class 9 soul engineers, but Yi Yulin's status seemed to be higher compared to Jing Zhon. Given different research directions, Class 9 soul engineers would achieve different things. Yi Yulin was among the top 3 Class 9 soul engineers in the Sun Moon Empire. In terms of his abilities, he was at least at Jing Hongchen's standard. He was even recognized as the controller of the stars and the sky. Right now, his dominant aura filled the entire stage as he scanned the 9 competitors coldly. Among all the 9 competitors, he was most drawn to Hui Yuhao. It was only when he looked at Hui Yuhao that his gaze turned much gentler. Although he was also representing an underground organization, Yi Yulin felt that Hui Yuhao seemed very determined, even with his disability. After all, soul engineers required a lot of resources. It was much more difficult for a crippled soul engineer to obtain resources compared to a normal soul engineer, so Yi Yulin paid more attention to Hui Yuhao. You'll be given 6 hours to create a soul tool. You can only create one soul tool, but you can use whatever materials you want. However, you can't use any half-finished products that were assembled earlier. If you are discovered doing something like this, you'll immediately be disqualified. At the same time, I need to remind all of you that you won't be given any time to rest after the 6 hours. We'll enter the technical test immediately. The lowest ranked of the 9 will be eliminated, and the rankings will also determine your places in the quarterfinals. That's why it's important for all of you to conserve some of your energy when you create your soul tool, so that you'll have some energy left to deal with the technical tests. The difficulty of the technical test is going to be very high. After hearing Yi Yulin's words, the 9 competitors were stunned. If even Yi Yulin claimed that the technical test was going to be difficult, it must be really difficult. Hui Yuhao was also slightly shocked. He shut his eyes and placed his hands on the table. He was waiting silently. The time starts now. Raise the soundproofing barriers. As Yi Yulin shouted, a layer of dim white rose from the sides of the stage. The gentle white light quickly formed a ceiling in the sky and covered the stage. All external noise was isolated. Yi Yulin also returned to his position and watched the soul engineers as they worked. Hui Yuhao immediately moved after Yi Yulin shouted. He grabbed a piece of rare metal with each of his hands before moving to the stamping equipment on the table. The rest started on their formation arrays, since they were in their best condition right now. Hui Yuhao, on the other hand, started with the shell of his soul tool. He was extremely quick, and used many pieces of rare metal and equipment to form the shell of his soul tool. He was also the one who moved the most because of his choice. He created pieces of abrasives. They were also quite large in size. Yi Yulin had been observing him earlier because of his disability. He was even more drawn now. Seeing the method that he used, Yi Yulin was a little stunned. What is this young man doing? Why isn't he creating his formation arrays when he's most focused, but instead creating his outer shell? Does he think it's more difficult to create the outer shell compared to the formation arrays he plans to use? While he thought like this, he wouldn't go and disrupt Hu Yuhao. Each competitor could choose how they wanted to create their soul tool. Hu Yuhao was too quick. In just a few minutes, there were already more than 10 metal shells on his carving table. Furthermore, each one of them was quite large. He needed to place some of them on the ground before he could continue his work. Among the 7 judges, the leftmost elder furrowed his brow and said, "Don't tell me that the disabled kid from the Duskwater Alliance is trying to take away all the rare metals by creating such a huge soul tool." Yi Yulin also furrowed his brow. He had also thought of the same thing. It seemed very possible. It had been less than 15 minutes, but Hu Yuhao had already used a lot of rare metals. At the same time, he had created many pieces of outer shell. It seemed like the soul tool he was creating today was going to be very large. The benefit of creating such a soul tool was that he could leave with a lot of rare metals. However, he was only using the cheaper rare metals, and hadn't used the more valuable ones yet. It was just that Yi Yulin couldn't tell what he was trying to create. Is it an original piece? That'll be interesting. Hu Yuhao was very quick, and seemed very serious too. However, no one noticed that he seemed to be less quick-witted than before, even though he still appeared to be very persistent. It was very tormenting to experience spiritual separation. He tolerated the bouts of weakness he felt as his spirit was separated from his body. Although he wasn't slow, his spiritual sea was billowing. It'll be great if my spiritual power became material. When I reach the concrete material realm, I won't have so many problems undergoing spiritual separation. Of course, Hu Yuhao knew that he should create his formation arrays when he had the most energy. It was just that he couldn't focus right now. The portion of spiritual power he had separated from himself in the carriage had already left this place under the concealment of his imitation and returned to Radiant City. He had attempted such a spiritual separation before, but had had to remain in a still state so that his energy would be focused on the spiritual power that had separated from his body. However, it was different this time. His actual body had to compete here, while he separated his spiritual power to perform other tasks. He was successful, but the side effects still left him feeling dizzy. Furthermore, his spiritual form and actual body kept on switching in his mind. If not for the fact that his spirit was sufficiently strong, this continuous change would have driven him crazy. However, he started to adapt as time passed. A trace of his spirit had been in his spiritual form. The consciousness within that trace of his spirit slowly awakened, and he managed to slowly separate his energy between both sides. He was truly multitasking now. However, this was his first attempt at such a thing. It was inevitable that he couldn't concentrate. When his spiritual form traveled in the air, there were a few times he almost got into an accident. While nothing had gone wrong so far, as he was working on his soul tool, he couldn't possibly develop his formation arrays, as he couldn't focus properly. When his spiritual form separated from him, Hu Yuhao gathered a lot of his spiritual power in it. It was a fascinating separation. His soul skills could also be separated between his two bodies. The 4 skills from his spirit eye's first soul ring were allocated to his spiritual form. Without his spiritual detection in his actual body, he could only create the outer shell of his soul tool. Fortunately, it wasn't his first time creating this soul tool. He was at least familiar with the steps. There were also many rare metals available to him. He wasn't bothered about failing, he just wanted to increase his speed. He wanted to give everyone a huge surprise. This soul tool he was creating was very important for that surprise. When he created this soul tool in the past, he couldn't bear to use rare metals. It was already very good if he could use some fine iron. But now that he had such excellent resources available to him, he couldn't spurn such a good opportunity. He had to try his best to gain as many benefits as possible. In addition, he would benefit greatly if he managed to successfully create this soul tool. Very soon, 1 hour had passed. As Yi Yulin had placed most of his attention on Hu Yuhao during this time, he started to figure some things out. Is this kid creating a human-shaped soul tool? How is that possible? From the outer shells that Hu Yuhao was assembling, he seemed to be forming the shape of a person. However, everyone in the world of soul engineers knew how difficult it was to create a human-shaped soul tool. Yi Yulin had tried it before. However, a human-shaped soul tool required too many formation array transducers. The requirements on the resources needed and the number of formation arrays that had to be linked, as well as one's control of the soul tool, were too high. It wasn't difficult to create a human-shaped soul tool that could be controlled. The difficult part was creating a human-shaped soul tool that could greatly increase one's abilities. It had to be superior to the controller's own abilities in terms of speed, attack, defense, and other aspects. It must also not restrain the soul skills that the controller could use. Even a Class 9 soul engineer finds it difficult to create a human-shaped soul tool, but this young man, who isn't even older than 30, is trying to create one in this tournament. Why is he so confident? Does he really think that he can create a human-shaped soul tool within 6 hours? And that it can help him win this tournament? No. Yi Yulin's eyes suddenly brightened. He started to understand what Hu Yuhao was doing. This kid can't move his lower limbs. He'll definitely suffer later. If he can create a human-shaped soul tool that can help him move, he might actually win. However, such a human-shaped soul tool has to be equipped with an additional offensive-type soul tool, but the rules dictate that each competitor can only create one soul tool. How is he going to overcome this dilemma? Don't tell me that he's going to forfeit after completing this human-shaped soul tool. Even if this is the case, can he really complete the hundreds of formation arrays needed for a human-shaped soul tool within 6 hours? And make it move? It's impossible. Suddenly, the Star Sky Doluo felt very confused. He was getting more and more curious as he watched Hu Yuhao. Hu Yuhao continued to work on his soul tool, but he didn't make any formation arrays. He was now making some smaller components. The rare metals that he used also became increasingly valuable. Good rare metals are indeed different. The difference between using tough spring copper and ordinary fine copper to create the same component is indeed very large. In the past, I only succeeded once after failing many times, and I still had to worry about the strength. However, I've succeeded in one try using this spring copper, and my worries are also allayed. The difference is too great. Ever since he became a soul engineer, Hu Yuhao had never enjoyed himself so much before. It was an enjoyment derived from being lavish. However, his concrete immaterial spiritual form was quickly traveling back to Radiant City even, as he was enjoying this experience with his actual body. The Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy was completely silent now. It wasn't long before the lights would be turned out. The academy students had long since returned to their dorms. Night had fallen, and the weather seemed a little gloomy. The lighting was very poor as night fell. Only the soul lamps along the sides of the walls in the academy managed to provide some lighting to their surroundings. There were a few figures standing at a gate not far from the academy. They had managed to camouflage themselves into the dark. Why is he not here? A captivating female voice sounded a little anxious. Don't be anxious, a cold voice replied. It was a voice that could leave a deep impression in one's mind. At this point, the clouds in the sky seemed to disperse. A streak of moonlight flashed past this dark corner they were in, revealing 5 figures. They were waiting silently. There were 5 people: Ji Juechen, Jing Ziyan, Xiao Xiao, Wang Donga and Wang Qiu'e. Yes, both Wang Qiu'e and Wang Donga were there. The entire Tang sect was waiting outside the hotel, apart from Bei Bei. They all looked ready for action, even though they were supposed to be resting in their hotel rooms right now. Wang Donga and Wang Qiu'e were the 2 that had been speaking earlier. Wang Donga furrowed her brow and revealed a mysterious look in her eyes. She wasn't worried about tonight's operation, but she couldn't help but fret as she heard that Hu Yuhao was about to perform a spiritual separation. Hu Yuhao's actual body still had to compete, and he was being watched by many eyes where he was, including many strong individuals from the Holy Ghost Church. His life might be endangered. Hikaitu couldn't possibly protect him on his own. However, it was too late now. They could only follow Hui Yuhao's plan and arrangements. The money is all in this card. Check it. Shu Sansha was covered in a black hat and veil. Jiang Nan Nan was the same. There was a sneaky middle-aged man in front of them. He glanced around, then quickly took the card from Shu Sansha. He retrieved a small soul tool and inserted the card into it. Very soon, an astronomical number appeared on the screen of this soul tool. The sneaky middle-aged man also appeared much more relaxed. Where are the goods? Shu Sansha asked. He exerted his dominance at this point. Part 2 end here.